Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the Treaded Path podcast, the podcast from Kufi Productions, where we explore the inspiring journeys of Muslim professionals across diverse industries. I'm your host, Salman Hasan, and each week we sit down with remarkable individuals who are making their mark in their chosen fields to highlight their successes and challenges and their journey, examining corporate accountability within their industry, providing practical resources for aspiring professionals, and also offering actionable advice on career advancement and ethical navigation to those who want to tread their path. So today I'm honored to be joined by Shaden Awad, founder of Quwa Labs, an engineering product studio. Shaden began her career at Microsoft and also lead on community leadership. And now she's, mashallah, partnering up with engineers and thought partners to design, build, and scale various products. As a reminder to our listeners, you can find the show notes, resources, ways to connect to our guest speakers in the Tread a Path archive in kufiproductions.com. So with that, Sister Shaden, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for joining us.
Allah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, absolutely. Before we dive in to your story, could you give our listeners a quick overview of your current role, what you're doing right now at Quwa Labs?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the CEO and founder of Quwa Labs. We're an engineering product studio, as you mentioned. So we help businesses based in the US, primarily startups, build out their MVPs, so their minimum viable products. We help them improve their existing business models from an engineering lens. We help integrate AI and ML, so machine learning solutions into existing businesses. So we kind of operate as a consulting service, but we are a lot more integrated and a lot more involved in the process than a regular consulting service is, which is why we're more of an engineering product studio. And then we also have our own projects that we own as a lab because we also try to generate this level of creativity throughout our team as well.
That sounds so interesting. I'd love to learn more about Quwa Labs. But I want to ask you, what initially drew you to tech and engineering? But what was so interesting that moved you to start Quwa Labs?
Yeah, so I think this kind of gets into my larger story. So I've always been really passionate about economic opportunity and this idea that, like, there's that age old saying, like, teach a man to fish, he eats for a day, give a man,
Yes, I
teach.
love that
Yeah,
phrase. Yeah.
exactly. It's one of those things where it's like, in the Muslim Ummah and a lot of the places in the world right now, we see a lot of these grants or these small initiatives to kind of give people a fish, but we don't actually see this growth of economic opportunity. So I'm Palestinian, so I felt very strongly about increasing economic opportunity in Palestine and job security for Palestinians. And that's kind of where the idea came from. And since I was an engineer by trade, it just made sense for me to kind of stay into that. And since Palestine's one of the most educated places in the Middle East, the connection kind of flowed from there. So the idea honestly came from the idea of having a means to help empower and employ people in the Middle East.
That's wonderful. I love that initiative that you're taking, especially from a Palestinian lens, right? Really not only empowering Palestinians, of course, to take the next step in initiatives and really think outside the box as far as designing, building, and scaling, but also you're empowering everybody from all walks of life to think really how to create solutions without dependencies to different organizations or agencies or even governments, right? But let's start from the beginning about your story. All right. What were early influences that shaped your career aspirations, right? So from when you finished college, right, or even when you started college, let's start from there. What steps did you take to get to the point that you are now?
As an engineer,
As a student engineer and a professional engineer, what were your early influences that kind of took you to that direction?
so I think a lot of so when it comes to engineering, my story is a bit more practical rather than passion driven. I'm the child of Palestinian immigrants. We didn't necessarily, alhamdulillah, we had a really great upbringing. But when it came to college, I was kind of on my own for that. So I was able to go to USC in the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And I went in pre-med and computer science because I wasn't sure if I wanted to go become a doctor or if I wanted to become an engineer. And then the decision honestly was made for me because as a computer science major, I was able to get a software engineering internship my freshman year summer, and I was able to use that money to fund my sophomore year education.
Nice.
So that it was a very
Nice.
practical decision. I needed money as soon as possible. I didn't have time to wait the 8, 12 years until I was able to make money as a doctor. So the decision was kind of made for me, but I was interested in the fact that, when you build things as an engineer and you build these platforms, you're able to help countless amounts of people. So I was very inspired by the impact as well. But at the end of the day, it was a monetary decision. It was paying for my sophomore year of college.
Absolutely. And, paying for education is one big hurdle, right? And it seems like every year that that goes by, that the price ceiling for education just keeps going up. It's ridiculous, but that's a different discussion altogether. But going back to your story, what were some challenges that you faced while you were a student at USC getting your education? What was particularly challenging for you while going through that part of the journey?
So I was definitely coming in as a student with not a lot of privilege. And I was entering a college with a lot of people who had a lot of privilege. So I remember I really
Mhm.
struggled academically. So there were classes where I really just really struggled to pass, which was really difficult because in high school, I was
Yeah.
kind of this model student. That's how I had gotten into USC in the first place. So then this idea of oh wait, I'm not a genius. All these people, I'm not the smartest person on the planet. And I think that bubble popping was kind of very difficult. But then on top of that, I was in these CS classes and it was my first time doing this type of, computer
Hmm.
science, really deep engineering work. And other people in my class would be able to finish assignments, do well on midterms when I would be getting 40% on these assignments and other people would be getting 90%. And I'd be so confused as to how things just clicked for them. And then I remember talking to someone in my class who had done really well. And I'd be like, how'd you know to take this approach? And they said, I actually had the same assignment in high school 3 years ago. And I was like, you were doing this in high school? And and I think that is a core memory of wow, this is not an even playing field. And I remember
Right.
that so critically. And then I was able to readjust my expectations. And it's well, actually, I'm not the dumbest person in the classroom. This is actually my first time seeing this. So I think that really shaped my experience. It was definitely humbling, but it also reminded me to be aware of the different circumstances that I was kind of coming from as compared to other people entering. And then also, do you happen to remember the college admissions scandal that happened with USC?
Mm,
Yeah. So that was while it was a huge thing. And that was actually while I was a student there. So some of my peers, some of my classmates it was coming out that their parents had bribed paid $1 million
oh my
to
God.
get them into USC. Meanwhile, I'm on financial aid. I qualified for work study. I qualified for the EBT, essentially food stamps card. And I was kind of wow, we're not coming from the same
No,
place.
no, not at all.
And and that and there was something liberating in that. There was something very cool where it's we're not coming from the same place, but I'm also still here. So I think I found a sense of pride and coming from that.
I'm glad you brought this up because, of course, yes, although the playing field is not even or level by any means, you can still see success in many different ways, right? So, to the viewers watching this, Shaden is, a living example of that, right? Like, she went into USC, or you went in there thinking you would be star student and you would accomplish so many things, but different things happen and you had different life events that occurred that took you to a different path, and you still saw success, right? So it's not the end of the world if you fail an exam, right? It's not the end of the world if you don't understand a particular subject, right? There's always ways around it, or you can always get help, right? I remember I had a just so we're kind of trying to relate to the similar
Yeah.
concept. I had a similar experience. The last year of my biomedical engineering studies at ASU, there's one course that was so hard. Even the smartest students could not get an A in that class, right? And I was not smart by any means, or you know, but nonetheless, we relied on each other. We had that community effect of like
Mhm.
just bringing ourselves forward and making sure that no one is left behind, and we're all able to graduate. And at the time we want to graduate, right? So you're not alone in this. That's the key thing that I'm trying to say is, definitely you can, lean on others or lean on particular resources to help you get, to a point you want to achieve or an objective you want to achieve, right? And so going back to your experience at USC, I mean, USC it's not the easiest school to graduate from what I've heard, right? It's one of the top tier schools in the nation. So kudos to those who, you know, attended, did their full studies and graduated from it, right? With full marks. And I think this is a great segue to my next question to you is about how the intersection between faith and the professional life, right? And even also while you're at college. Here at the podcast, we bring this up, right? To highlight that practicing Islam and live and creating a living for yourself, and creating that professional life for yourself are not two exclusive things. They can be intertwined, right? So wanted to ask you how your experience with that, how you try to do that, through college and after college as well. How has your faith influenced your career choices and your professional approach?
Yeah, there's it's a great question. It definitely resonates a lot with my specific journey. So I after graduating college, I went to Microsoft as a software engineer. So kind of to kind of close the loop on you don't have to be the smartest person in your classroom to still
Yeah.
succeed. I had taken I think my second semester freshman year, like that semester GPA was, if I'm not mistaken, a 1.7. I had failed Calc 3. I had to take Calc 3 twice. And then I got a C in data systems, or what was it? Data, the like intro CS course. So I was like making it by the skin of my teeth. But if you look at me compared to any other USC graduate, my diploma looks exactly the same. It's like make it by, and I still had a job at Microsoft right out of college. So these are things that it's very I had an internship at JP Morgan my sophomore year. I think often we get really like beaten down about these different things, and it's like our stories are different and these people are going to understand it, and at the end of the
Yeah.
day people want people that can market themselves, people want people that can, that are authentic, have a moral code or moral value. So I think going into college I was super involved. Alhamdulillah, I was really involved in the volunteer space. I worked at the volunteer services building as part of my work study. I was involved with the Muslim Students Union at USC. I was involved with, it was called the Ansar Service Partnership. It was like the
Yeah.
volunteer arm of the Muslim Students Union at USC. So I was always grounded in ethics and everything that I did. And I think I remember one time in one of my computer science courses, my professor, there was a super hard assignment, and I always went to my professor's office hour. So I think that's a tidbit of practical advice. Like all my professors knew my names, and I remember there was a time that my professor rounded me up. I don't even know how he's allowed to do this. And he doesn't work at USC anymore, so I don't feel bad about sharing this information and getting him in trouble.
Okay.
He
Sure.
rounded me up from like a C to a B minus. Like he really rounded me up because of just the effort that I put in. So there it really is something to be said about showing up. But I remember I went to him about this really difficult assignment. He walked me through the problems with my friends, and then that same assignment he went on like online services and like on Reddit and like Quora, and he put a fake answer online to catch people who had been cheating on the assignments, since we weren't allowed to be using the website. And because of that, almost half of my class was reported to this like academic, like cheating, that service. And then it's like, but I just didn't move that way, like as a Muslim. And
Mm-hmm.
like as someone grounded in faith, and no hate to someone who needs to use external services, but there is something to be said about sticking to this ethics.
Sure.
I think I did care a
Yeah.
lot about learning, even if it meant I was ending with this, even if it took more time. So I think the fact that I was able to move that way really blessed me. It allowed me to get, it allowed me to have great relationships. I had that 1.7 GPA second semester freshman year. I still was able, because my professor wrote me an incredible letter of rec, I still got a scholarship that allowed me to attend. It's called the Grace Hopper Conference. It's for women in computing. I got a
Okay.
full ride scholarship to attend that conference
Oh,
the next
mashallah.
year. And that was still, and they asked for my GPA. And I think, first semester, I didn't know what I got, but I was definitely under a 3.0. But when a professor writes, but this girl really cares, there's really something to be said about that. And I think that's all driven by faith and the fact that I knew that I was the child of Palestinian refugees. And the way I move through this world is fundamentally different than the way
Mm. Yeah.
non-Muslims will move through this world,
Yeah.
because I try my best to show up with gratitude. I try my best to show up with ethics and faith and all of these different things. So it always was a core part of my college experience. And then going into Microsoft, I was super grateful to Microsoft for even taking me. It was kind of like this like imposter syndrome, like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, Microsoft, for hiring me. But even then, even with that, I joined Microsoft and I instantly got involved with, ethics and morality, and getting involved with like the Muslim community at Microsoft, starting the Palestinian organization at Microsoft, because I was very aware that like in any space that I am in, that is a space where I need to be advocating. And it's kind of like the sense of responsibility that we have as Muslims on a day to
Yeah.
day basis.
No, absolutely. I love your advice on like, effort and showing up, right? And integrity, right? These things should be ingrained into our lives and into our studies and into our profession, right? Because the earlier you practice this and sustain this and keep it, part of your daily practice, the more you're going to see the success that you plan for yourself, you hope to achieve, and whatever job you're applying for, if you're, or the spouse or the partner you're looking for in your life, whatever life achievement you're trying to achieve, having these values ingrained into your life will take you to the skies, as the saying goes, right? And I think this is great to segue to the next question about like your the faith about enhancing your professional effectiveness, right? And how that really treads the way of how you conduct yourself, in your daily business or the clients you work with. So if you can expand on that a little bit, like even at Quwa Labs right now, how did you see your faith coming to really enhance the way you work professionally?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I think I don't have a lot of tidbits from Microsoft that I can reference, and maybe that was a
And
tell
we'll talk about Microsoft later on.
sign. Exactly, because I think, alhamdulillah, with Quwa, I'm able to show up more authentically all the way through. So kind of corporate responsibility and all of that. I think I have a lot of privilege now owning my own business to kind of operate with the way I show up. I was on the Nothing But Facts podcast by Dr.
Yep.
Shadi a couple of days ago, and we were kind of
Yes.
talking about this same idea of like, well, how do you move as a Muslim business owner on a day-to-day basis? And one thing that I referenced was, I think when it comes to negotiations with a
Mm,
client or something like that, I will never reach a point where I have to negotiate down a salary that I've already set the bar for with my engineers. So there could hypothetically be this situation where someone's like, hey, I only have this amount to take on this project. But as a result of taking that on, that would result in a cut to the salary that I'm giving, an engineer. And I could hypothetically go to that engineer and explain the situation to them and say, hey, you're actually going to be making X amount instead of this amount. Are you still willing to take it on? just I feel like from an ethical and a Muslim perspective, I've set this level of salary when it comes to my engineers. And I feel, and I think it comes from an Islamic place of like, I feel almost this shame to even go to them and ask them to negotiate their salary. So when I move with my negotiations, it's only with regards to Quwa Labs getting a cut or my pay taking a cut, because I don't even feel comfortable asking members of my team to cut their own salary.
Yeah.
That just
Yeah.
doesn't feel Islamic. It doesn't feel like the way I move. So if it means I'm turning down contracts, then I'm turning down contracts. I don't know if you've heard of this idea of, have you heard of the term free sabilillah?
Yeah.
You've heard of it?
I've heard of it in different contexts, but yes. Yep.
Yes. So I think that's something that I've definitely been going through, because it becomes this weird back and forth of like, well, I really do want to help this business, but they have a really small budget. But if I take on the small budget, I'm messing with the salary of my employees. So where I've kind of landed on that is like, I set my prices, and Dr. Shetty was actually he kind of spoke a bit about some Islamic concepts that are tied to this of like, we shouldn't actually be, asking our Muslim brothers and sisters for cheaper prices. Like that's not
Yeah.
this idea of like, oh, well, you run a Muslim business, then you have to give me something for free because I'm also Muslim. That is one of my biggest things, because if a nonprofit comes to me and they want me to do something for free, then I'm messing with the salaries of my employees. I have a wajib onto them, and I need to be very careful about this responsibility that I've taken on. So I think navigating those is definitely something that I've learned about. But where I kind of land is like, this business that I've created and the employees that I, have hired, my responsibilities to them, I need to take that very seriously. And I need to only take on contracts that fall within, the scope of which I can uphold these responsibilities that I've kind of taken on.
I'm so glad you're mindful of this particular aspect of leadership, and I want more people to hear this as well, right? That especially if you're Muslim and you're a leader, you need to be mindful not only of yourself and your business, your company, but those who are supporting you, your employees, your donors, if you're in the nonprofit space, right? Those who are acting as your sponsors or partners, right? Being mindful of everything is necessary, but it's also one of the hardest things to do, right? And to keep that as a daily practice, because like you're saying, based on certain actions that you take, it could be taken away from your employees' paychecks, right? It could be impacting the trust that your donors have with you, right, when they're donating to your nonprofit. And unfortunately, this is in the corporate world, right? A lot of people say these things about Muslims that they're not, from what I've heard and from what I experience as well, that they're not professional in that sense, where they're not holistic in their thinking. They're not cut out for leadership because they don't keep the bigger picture in mind, right?
Mm.
Um, and so kind of going back to your one other point I wanted to make is that unfortunately a lot of the big tech companies or corporations that we hear of, like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, like there's that conception of like, doing anything for the dollars, right? Doing anything to get ahead, right? At the expense of their employees, at the expense of humanity,
Mm-hmm.
God forbid, right? But we'll get to that in a moment. But could you, going back to your experience with Microsoft, could you share with us like any experiences that you've seen at the corporate level that, treaded or that tested your faith in a sense, right? Of like, oh my gosh, I know this about my company. What should I do? Right? Like,
Where to start?
like, and I was going to ask you also if you know that sister, I'm blanking on her name, that she attended that Microsoft event and she spoke up and she got fired immediately.
Ibtihal. Yes, of course. Yes, yes. She's amazing. I think she just got hired at, if I'm not mistaken, Yakin.
Yakin, she's that
Yeah.
Yakin. Yes.
SubhanAllah. The way
So,
the doors open, mashallah. It's amazing. Uh,
mashallah. But yeah, like you worked there too as well, right? And so like what could people do to, by people I mean like Muslim professionals in the corporate space especially, do to really uphold that accountability, right? And then, combating some of those misconceptions that people have among Muslims or Muslim leaders. Like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's a great question. So unfortunately, I do find it to be it's a bit nuanced. So I think there are some, as the rise of, activism and exposing kind of the crimes against humanity that we've seen, all, the big tech companies, we see Meta,
Yes.
we see Amazon, we see Microsoft, all, involved in surveillance. They're helping, fund the genocide in Gaza. They're helping in that software. That's unequivocally blood on their hands.
Yeah.
1,000%. When it comes to kind of, but I do find that it's very important for me to move very intentionally when I speak on uh, activism and what an individual should do if they are, in these tech spheres. So,
Yeah.
you're not helping anyone as a Muslim if you are homeless, if you don't take on any unethical job, and then you don't, you can't provide for your family, you aren't upholding your responsibilities. So alhamdulillah, I was able to quit my job. That comes from a lot of privilege. Like, that comes from a lot of privilege. And I would not, and I'm not going to sit here and recommend, because
You're right.
you have some, younger and career folks, you have different people listening. I would be, it would be unwise of me to sit here and tell everyone, quit your job. If you work at an unethical place, quit your job.
Right.
So, I think the fiqh behind it Islamically is like, if you're at a place where, like Islamically, should you quit your job? No, it's haram for any Muslim to work at like a casino, because the main
Right.
purpose
Of
of,
course.
even if you're like, I think the example Dr. Shetty gave was like changing a light bulb. You Islamically, as Muslims, you can't even change a light bulb at a
Mm.
casino as a job, because the main purpose of that institution is to gamble, which is unethical at its core.
At its
On the
core.
other side, is it halal for a Muslim to work at like a grocery store? And again, we'll get into like war crimes that kind of carry a lot more weight, but like when it comes to like grocery stores, well, they sell pork, they might sell like alcohol. But the main purpose of a grocery store is to sell food, which is halal.
Sure. Yeah.
So in that way, it's halal for Muslims to work at, a grocery store, even if that grocery store does sell pork. So when it comes to kind of like our jobs, I would break it down into three different scenarios. If you are able to get a job that is more ethical and more halal, then do it. Speaking transparently, like my husband also left his job at Microsoft, but we made a decision that he was not going to leave his job at Microsoft until he found another job. We were not just going to quit and then, pray. It's like that, the hadith of
Sure.
like, have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but tie your camel. Like, make sure you're good. You have to make
Right.
sure you have these commitments to your family, to your spouse. So he was able, alhamdulillah, to find a job at a more ethical company that is not complicit in genocide. So he left Microsoft at that point and moved. So if you are able to quit your job and find another job, do that. If you are
Okay.
not able to, don't quit your job. Don't just like throw up your hands and quit unless you have the means and this kind of privilege. But a lot of people don't. What I think is very important when it comes to ethics in a space is, I really don't appreciate, or the learned helplessness, if that kind of makes sense. I think there's a lot
Mm.
of people at these like
Yeah.
big companies that are like, Microsoft is complicit in genocide. Like, I can't quit my job because I have a family, so like I can do nothing. And it's like, we're never helpless. At Microsoft, I know for a fact there are mentorship programs with Palestinian youth. Get involved in the mentorship program. If that's the only thing you can do, do that. The only place I think where I draw issue is when people do nothing. But
Mm.
as long as you were involved in the activism, and again, it's a temperature check, because what
Of
Ibtihal did,
course.
she went into that.
Of
She knew.
course.
She probably knew that there was a high risk of her getting fired. So if you have a family and children and you need to provide for that, then I don't think, if you were to ask Ibtihal, I don't think she would tell you to do what she did. She would tell you, okay, well, gauge where you're at and get involved in some way. Sign a petition, help talk to like your managers, gauge these meetings, do something. So I think activism is a wajib on all of us. We need to be involved in speaking out for what's ethical but we also need to be calculated and
Hmm.
intentional about it.
I like the perspective, and I like how you break it down by thick, right? Like, first think about what's further on upon yourself, right? Further upon yourself is taking care of yourself, your
Mhm.
family, those who depend on you, right? Because if you put that at risk, everything else after the fact is irrelevant, right? But if you have your bases covered, like you were saying, then absolutely the next set of actions or the next order of actions is to do what is necessary, what is compulsory, according to the context at play, of course, right? So within your means, and of course not doing anything without the consultation of those around you and those who are important to you, and of course you're making dua to Allah, right? I watched the interview of Ibtihal with Sheikh Omar Suleiman, and she
Yes.
mentioned that she made dua and prayed tahajjud and everything possible prior to that incident, right? That event. And she for a fact said, hands down, that if it wasn't for that intercession of Allah to open the way for her to do that, she wouldn't have gone through with it.
Mhm.
Because going back to your earlier point, don't just cold quit or cold cut your job, or just leave and say, hey, you're complicit, wag your finger, I'm out. And you don't have any backup plan, no contingency plan, no, like, nothing to fall back on. But you're just following a whim in a sense, right? So I like that, for the fact that, like, you're planning your future, right? You're planning for what's to come, or what you want to happen in the future, for your not only for yourself, but for collectively speaking as a society. And so I think this is a you know and my next question to you about, when it comes to examples of companies that you want to you know do business with or work for, right? Those companies or organizations that do follow ethical practices and do keep their employees in their best interest. Are there examples of that? I'm sure there are examples of that in your sphere, of course, right? But if you could name a few, and where did you find these companies, how did you find them, could you share that with us a little bit?
Yeah, ethical employers. Okay, so we're definitely not looking at the big names, unfortunately, but I've heard of, I mean, there are a lot of groups that are kind of popping up that will have this more holistic, cohesive list of some of these companies that do have ethical hiring standards. I love to mention Elif. They're based in San
I love
Francisco.
Aleph.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're great. They just launched, I think it was like a hiring pipeline of value aligned businesses that were looking to hire talent. So
Okay.
I would definitely recommend Elif. There's also a MENA organization based in New York called Viaka. They
Okay.
Viaka. I've kind of been involved with them. They're super great. I love the ethics behind a lot of the things that they do, and I've been to a couple of their events in New York. I love the way that operate, and they bring in really cool guest speakers, so they also have this really professional air to what they do, and they also have really cool connections to other businesses. So it's a great question. I like to be very, one thing that I think I have like a small one, so like Replit. Replit great. They're great. I think one thing that I'm trying to do and where I'm kind of pulling from is I'm trying to move away from unethical tools when
Hmm.
it comes to tools that
That's a
I'm
good
using in
point.
my business.
Yes.
Yeah. So, for example, like I pay my talent, and some of them are based in Palestine. A lot of the platforms that exist that
Yeah.
allow for you to pay, a lot of them are not ethical. So, what I do, and this is kind of another act of privilege, but another act of resistance that I'm able to take, is I actually pay more for another platform that isn't genocide
Yeah.
aligned. And that platform is called Plane. So I do that. I try very hard. So Plane, Mercury, I use them for my bank account. They have a Muslim founder. So I hope they are also value aligned. I try to be very intentional. I don't know if you heard the CEO of Ben and Jerry's quit about two
Yes.
weeks
I
ago.
did hear about that. Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was very cool.
That's a
And
huge story. Yeah.
yeah, and which it was a little, it's upsetting because I think he kind of moved into this idea of acquisition because they felt as though they'd still be able to hold up their social justice principles. And then at this point, they weren't able to anymore. So I
Yeah.
guess maybe Ben and Jerry's isn't an ethical employer. Those are the ones that come to mind.
That's no, this is great, and I'm sure there are more out there for sure. But this is a great list, and you also brought up a great point about like not only who you work with, but what tools do you use, right? And do you work with as well to keep in mind that are they ethically in line with your values, or are they complicit in any way to any kind of unethical activity, right? And with the backdrop of privilege, right, making sure that if you have the necessary contingency plan or backup plan to make sure that you can still do what you do, then
Mhm.
by all means use another tool, work at a different company, right? And I think that's also really good thing to keep in mind and practice as well as you tread your professional path. So let's pivot over to your particular role at Quwa Labs and what you do there. Can you walk us through kind of like a typical day or week in what you do right now, and what does that look like, in your shoes?
Yeah. So, alhamdulillah, I have a team of about 25-ish people. Some are engineers, some are designers, some are QA, and some are marketing. And a typical week in my life, alhamdulillah,
This is my favorite question because the answer is different all the time. It's
it's a
different.
sure, it's across the
Yes.
board. I'm still in a very early, Quwa Labs is only a couple months old. I think, alhamdulillah, I've been able to grow it quite a bit through my LinkedIn following. I post a lot on LinkedIn. I don't know if I'd identify as a LinkedIn influencer, but I
Let's say you are.
hope maybe. I don't know. That sounds a little embarrassing, the term, but it works. It's one of those things where I
Yeah.
did kind of have to get over myself and start posting because it works really well. It builds a lot of credibility. So that's actually a really practical piece of advice. Individuals who post on LinkedIn gain a lot of credibility. I gain a lot of inbound that way. A lot of our current clients for Quwa Labs are from LinkedIn. So I'm very intentional about upholding my LinkedIn presence. That makes it sound like I spend many hours a week doing that. In actuality, every 2 to 3 weeks, I sit down and I write 6 or 7 posts, and then I schedule them for the 3 weeks ahead.
That's smart.
And then
Yeah.
I'm able to kind of still uphold that presence. But what I will say takes up a lot of my time now is inbound calls with my clients. So if someone's interested in using our services, I'll talk to them, and I'm still kind of that first round of, defense. I'll kind of talk to them. I'll learn about their any problems they're having. We'll do solutions. Additionally, with Quwa, we also own and build out our own projects. So, right now we're iterating on this data solution that we can offer to businesses as maybe a service or as a SaaS platform. So, we're investing in talking to a lot of founders in these exploratory calls where we talk to them about some of the data issues they're facing. What are some things that they wish worked better? What are some services they wish they had? So we're moving very intentionally that way. I also spend a lot of time doing logistical meetings, kind of making sure that the needle is moving on different projects. So at any given time, Quwa has about 7 to 8 ongoing projects, and I try to cap it there because once we go above that, the quality bar
Yeah.
I feel will start to teeter. And that's also kind of an Islamic principle. Like, I'm not going to take on a contract. I had someone reach out to me asking to take on work, and I told them no because I felt like I wouldn't be able to uphold the quality bar that I like to have. And I'm not going to take money from someone in a way that I'm not going to take money that I don't find to be totally halal, totally ethical. I don't want to provide a service to you if I don't know that I can uphold this
Right.
quality bar.
Yeah.
So I would say upholding or maintaining projects takes about 50 to 60% of my time. And then I spend around 20% of my time doing outbounds and talking to more people. And then the last 20% are logistical tasks, so payroll and that type of thing. But it shifts a lot. I think I'm in a really interesting place where I'm still trying to be very intentional about what I take on. And I'm in this place where I still can kind of figure out what Quwa Labs is, what we do.
Sure. Yeah.
where we're going. So I think I'm in a really interesting spot. That's exciting.
It is exciting, and I love to hear about stories about founders who recently started their company, because you get to see like the early steps and early decisions that they make. I want to ask you, as you're developing Quwa Labs, your particular journey, and also serving your employees, what development opportunities have been most valuable to you, right? As you started Quwa Labs, right? You mentioned, um, through LinkedIn, you found a lot of opportunities to, to develop Quwa Labs and yourself as a professional. Are there other opportunities such as that or similar to that that have been valuable to you as well?
That have helped kind of kickstart the growth, is what you mean?
Growth. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Relying on my network and speaking to people in my network. I think that is definitely just kind of setting up casual coffee chats and just telling people what I'm up to. No agenda, no kind of, if I have an ask, I'll come with an ask, and I try very I try to be very intentional about the fact that the worst thing someone can say is no. I try to move with that confidence, and if I have something or a connection that I think would be helpful, I do try to ask that person. On the other side, yeah, so speaking very intentionally. But also, if I don't have an agenda and there's a mentor that I really respect and I really like, I'll just do a coffee chat with them. And a lot of
Yeah.
times, I'll be like, you should just talk to this person. You should just talk to this person. And those are really great. I actually just had one of those, like, oh, you should chat with this person. I had one of those conversations last week, and we're about to kick off our contract. So it's very cool, because when you have, it's a lot warmer of an intro than a cold message, because a cold message on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, a cold outreach is like, well, who's this person? They're trying to sell me something. But if I'm coming through someone who already trusts me and this third party also trusts me, it allows there to be, they trust this middle person. It allows for a very warm intro, and they're more eager to take on, a partnership with us. So maintaining network connections is definitely super helpful. And if you don't have an agenda, just ask what they're up to and just kind of have a really casual chat.
Yeah. Speaking of mentors, is there any in your life that have been really influential in your career and even at Quwa Labs, and as you develop Quwa Labs in your professional journey? Is there any one or two that have stood out to you and you recommend people to reach out to them?
Mentors in my career. I think one of my clients that I also kind of turned into one of my mentors as well. I went to a
Okay.
chat. There's an organization called Friday. They're based in New York. They're also based in LASF, possibly North Carolina as well.
I think
And
they're in the Bay Area, but yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and they're just kind of, how would you describe Friday? They're like a,
I've also had the same question too, right? Because I looked them up, and then I think they're a resource, to be honest, for founders and entrepreneurs, right?
yeah, they're a resource. They do a lot of community building for Muslim
Community building.
founders.
Right.
Yeah. So I went to one of their events, and the like kind of fireside chat speaker was this individual named Sanat, and she runs a speakers agency for Muslim women called Uproar. And I just thought she was so captivating in the way that she spoke. I thought she carried herself with such grace and such ethics. And I also thought her business idea was really cool. So she became one of my clients, but then I also see her as one of my mentors as well. So I would highly recommend, if you need kind of a speaker or you just need someone to talk to, she's really, really great. I really love her because she moves in a way that it's very no strings attached. Like, if
Yeah.
there's something she can do, and I think this is really cool about being kind of like in a Muslim ecosystem. It's, once you might, there are certain groups, or if you talk to someone, it might feel like, okay, well, if I'm doing this for you, what can you do for me? Or I'm not going to do something for you until you can do something
Right.
for me.
Yeah.
With her and other members of kind of our community, alhamdulillah, I feel like it's very like, oh, I can do something for you. Okay, I'll do something for you. It's no, you don't need to do something back for me right now. But yeah, if you want me to make this connection, of
That's
course I'll make this
wonderful.
connection. So she's really, really great. I would highly recommend Uproar and kind of reaching out to her. Other great mentors. That's a great question. I try to just I remember there was an individual. So I started Palestinians and Allies at Microsoft called Pam.
Pam.
And one of our leaders at Microsoft, she's very high up at Microsoft. Her name's Fatima Kardar. She is absolutely lovely and she is just kind of a powerhouse. And she was able to kind of push the needle on our agenda a lot. And I think I looked up to her. I still look up to her a lot. I've decided to kind of move away from this idea of kind of climbing the corporate ladder. But I do
Yeah.
think there is a benefit to having Muslims in positions of power at these big companies. And she's definitely in a position of power. So I highly recommend finding kind of Muslim, powerhouses in your business and building a connection with them as well.
No, that's wonderful, and I love those names that you provided here. For a couple of reasons. One, they're Muslim powerhouses, but two, they're women as well. Right? I'm seeing that there are not a lot of women role models that you know in the past, at least, right now, alhamdulillah, there are a lot more influential women, Muslim women role models in the corporate space and the leadership spaces as well, right? So I love seeing that trend, and I think we need to keep pushing on that so that we can encourage more women, Muslim women representation in these spaces, right? And especially in the leadership ranks as well. And I wanted to ask you this question before we wrap up for the recording. Is it one piece of advice that you could give to a young Muslim professional, right? Either whoever's watching this or in general, what's your one piece of advice that you give, that you love to give to them? It could be anything. It could
Yeah.
be whether it's directly related to your field or what you're doing, or just being a great Muslim professional. What is that one advice?
Move in a way that reflects, make it seem that even if you don't believe it in that moment in time, when
Yeah,
you talk to other people, when you move through this professional world, if you need to fake it, that's fine, but act as if you deserve to be there. I think when I went to Microsoft, I kind of alluded to this earlier. I was so grateful to Microsoft for hiring me. I was like, wow, I'm a child of like immigrants. My parents were refugees, and Microsoft hired me. Thank you so much to Microsoft. And I wish I could go back and tell myself that I was doing Microsoft a favors the word, but they didn't hire me out of charity. They didn't
right,
hire me out
right,
of the goodness of their hearts. We can see from a day-to-day basis now with the crimes being committed. It's not like Microsoft has a conscience. It's a business. They hired me because I'm smart and I'm capable. And I wish I showed up in spaces earlier with that same mentality, because it will take you a lot farther, and a lot of people have no idea what they're doing and they just act as they do, and it takes them far. So get, because people, if you don't believe in yourself, this person that you're kind of talking to, they're not going to believe in yourself for you.
right.
So that confidence is going to hold a lot of weight. um and then when it comes to practically, I would say, LinkedIn, message, set up coffee chats, talk to as many people as possible, build up your network. There are people who want to invest in you. Just find out who those people are and maintain those relationships.
I love those advices. It reminded me of an advice from a previous podcast episode. The sister was saying, believe in the gifts that Allah has given you. A lot of times we don't realize that we already have the abilities and gifts that already Allah has granted us, right? We're not using it. We're not utilizing it to the best of our abilities, right? So to your point, not only having that confidence to show up and be there, but also believing that you were meant to be there. You are, whether it's that first job in Microsoft, whether it's like you started your own company, you founded your own company, know that you are meant to be in this path that you're treading right now, right? And you have the skills necessary to execute whatever objective that you're trying to achieve, right? I thought that was a powerful reminder, and thank you for sharing that with us again. That so many young like people, and I'm guilty of myself as well for this, but like we just constantly put ourselves down, right?
Yes,
For the sake of whatever, right? For the sake of whatever thing we want to do, we're constantly like the imposter syndrome, right?
totally.
Like it always comes in, right? And we have to actively combat that and say, hey, you're not an imposter. You are real. You have the skills. Go get it. Go achieve whatever objective you're trying to achieve. Do the thing you're meant to do. So, no, I love that for sure.
There's a place for humility in the world. And I think humility is very important as a Muslim. The professional sphere is not the place to embody that.
Nope.
It's the place to, show up and be confident. And it's not un-Islamic. Show up confidently. There's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put you here for a reason. Show up confidently.
Yep. No, absolutely. I love that. That's so great. So, before we finish this, I wanted to ask you if, for those who want to reach out to you for advice, right? Mashallah, I think you qualify as a really good mentor in addition to the names that you put out there. So, if anyone who wants to reach out to you for advice, for mentorship, possibly, how can they best reach out to you?
I would say my LinkedIn.
LinkedIn?
Message me on LinkedIn. Yeah. So my LinkedIn you would follow, but then you'd also have to go and connect with me specifically. And I'm very intentional about accepting all my connections. And then if you send me a message on there, I will see it. And then if you go to qualabs.com, you can also, there's a form at the bottom where you can fill it out, and that will actually route directly to my inbox. So that works as well. And then I can also provide my email. It's my first name, Shaden, at qualabs.com.
.com. Okay. All right. Sounds good. So yes, please reach out to Sister Shaden if you have advice, or if you need advice and you have questions.
If you have advice, I'll take your advice.
she she's an open book. She's ready to hear you out, whether
Totally.
it's a question or giving advice
Please.
as well, inshallah. And specific to Quwa Labs, what is the best way to support you and Quwa Labs as well? What would you like to share to the audience in that regard?
Your business. If you work at a company where you take on consultants or there's something that needs improving, the AI world is rapidly growing and rapidly, changing. And
100%.
a lot of businesses, I fear, will be left behind if they don't catch up really quickly. And I think one of the most fulfilling things is we're helping modernize a lot of businesses, and that doesn't mean that your job is at risk. I think there's a lot of fear around AI where it's like, if I implement AI, I'm then going to get fired. That's not where we are.
No, not at all.
AI will help grow the business you're a part of if you have your own business. So if you need any engineering solutions, if you need marketing solutions, design solutions, please reach out and we can definitely support you in that way. I think that would be the best way to support Quwa Labs.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan. Well, Shaden, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today, your professional journey, and your insights as well will definitely resonate with our listeners. It definitely did to me. I'm going to take some of that and apply it to my personal and professional journey as well. So, Jazakallah khair. And with that, assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Thank you for listening to the Tread a Path podcast. You can find all the resources our guests mentioned in the Tread a Path archive in our website, coffeeproductions.com, along with the links to connect with our guest speakers. If today's conversation inspired you or helped you in your own professional journey, we'd love to hear from you. So please leave us a review, share the episode with someone who might benefit, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. May your treaded path be blessed and full of wisdom. Assalamu alaikum.